Good evening, Buddhas and ancestors. Thank you all for being here this evening. I'd like to begin with some expressions of gratitude and by offering some acknowledgements. And my voice is a bit weaker than usual. I'm recovering from a little bit of a respiratory illness. So I'm going to nominate Daishi and Megan as my monitors. And if I get too quiet, just go like this. And if I'm not looking, throw something. So first, I want to express my gratitude to Mary Renard, who was our host here at Crow's End. It's been such a wonderful home for all of us for so many years, and hopefully many years to come. Second, to acknowledge that we sit on the land of the Northern Chumash. The Chumash people are the original caretakers of this land. For thousands of years, they cared for this land, which we all love and know so well. They cared for an area that stretches from what is now San Luis Obispo County, where we are tonight, down the coast through Santa Barbara and Ventura into northern LA County. So quite an area. Chumash continue to be in relationship with these lands through ceremony, culture, stewardship are an important part of this area. And not too long ago, the National Marine Sanctuary was approved just before the outgoing administration at the federal level. So one of the largest marine sanctuaries in the United States was formed off our coast under joint stewardship with the Chumash. So join me, palms together, in acknowledging the Chumash. Also like to pay my respects to the original Japanese and Chinese immigrants who came to the United States and brought the Buddha Dharma to this land. They were here a long time before practicing the Dharma. They were here a long time practicing the Dharma before the dominant culture took notice, and before many of us who come from different ancestral backgrounds encountered the Dharma and began to practice it. So please join me in acknowledging them as well. Fourth, I always like to acknowledge and offer a deep bow of appreciation to our Buddha ancestors of the Zen lineage. The opportunity to study the Buddha way is a rare and precious thing, and it didn't have to come down to us here in this place at this time. So I'm deeply grateful for that. And I hope you are too. So I began actually by greeting you as Buddhas and ancestors. And you know, different people have different ways of greeting the audience or the listeners at the beginning of their talk. Roshi likes, for some reason, greeting future corpses. Roshi Ryoto prefers the milder greetings bodhisattvas, which is always appropriate. I like both of those, honestly. I began by greeting you all as Buddhas and ancestors because I want you to keep in mind that the Buddhas and ancestors, to us, many of them may not have known they were ancestors when they lived. And so we do not know who we are, the Buddha ancestors to the future. But if you ever wonder about the significance of your practice, maybe that's something to keep in mind. In some way, large or small, you, we, I are carrying forward the Dharma and the Zen lineage, and hopefully it will be here 1,000, 2,000, or 2,500 years from now, just like it is for us. So thank you all. Thank you, Megan, for the honey in this tea. And maybe what saves my voice this evening. So I want to start with case 4 of the True Dharma Eye, Zen Master Dōgen's 300 Koans. Case called, or a koan called Mazu's Heart Sutra. The main case. Once, lecturer Liang of Mount Shi studied with Mazu, who said, "Which sutra do you teach?" Liang said, "The Heart Sutra." Mazu said, "How do you teach it?" Liang said, I teach it with my mind. Mazu said, the mind is like an actor. The will is like a supporting actor. The objects of the six senses are like their company. How can they teach Sutra? Liang said, if the mind can't teach it, can emptiness teach it? Mazu said, yes, emptiness can teach it. Liang flipped his sleeves and walked away. Mazu called out, lecturer. Liang turned his head and Mazu said, from birth till death, it's just like this. Liang had realization at that moment, and he hid himself at Mount Shi and was not heard from again. Not sure about that ending, but apparently he had a lot of work to do. So the capping verse, right within light, there is darkness. Right within darkness, there is light. Going to where life itself springs forth, the body of suchness is revealed. So a few weeks ago, we had an atonement ceremony called Fusatsu in Japanese. And traditionally, in a monastery setting, this ceremony would take place on every full moon, so roughly once a month. We don't do atonement that frequently here, but we do aim to do it about once a quarter. And atonement is an important part of our formal practice together as a sangha. But within the container of the atonement ceremony, we create a space where we can take responsibility for our actions and the karmic entanglements we create for ourselves and others, and renew our aspiration, or if we receive jukai, renew our actual vows to live an ethical life. Atoning for our mistakes and misdeeds, and resetting our intention to cultivate wisdom and compassion in our lives is central to any spiritual path, but is especially important in Zen practice. Now, last Thursday, we had a different ceremony. This one recognized our Sangha's past 3 head trainees who are here with us tonight. And they were each presented with a blue rakusu like the one I'm wearing. And the blue rakusu represents a significant milestone, of course, in a Zen student's path of practice. Many of you were there at the Hosen for our 3 most recent head trainees. And it signifies they have successfully completed their head training year and survived the Dharma combat, which is the main event, so to speak, in their Hosen. In Zen, we have a lot of ceremonies, actually, you may have noticed, and a lot of liturgy, and a lot of what you could call forms, generally. I'd like to say something briefly about that and start first with liturgy. So first, let's say something about what we mean by liturgy. Common definition you'll find in our culture, and this one comes from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, is slanted towards the Krishna perspective, and that is a religious rite or ritual prescribed for public worship. Now, in Zen liturgy, of course, we're not so much worshiping. So what are we doing? From the absolute perspective, we could say that liturgy is a communal response to and participation in the Dharma as one body together to enact the teaching. In this, John Roshi, founder of Zen Mountain Monastery, famously said that Zen liturgy makes visible the invisible. It does this by pointing to our fundamental nature and our interconnectedness with all things. So on Thursday nights, like tonight, we do some liturgy in the form of a short service before we sit. And the service is a condensed version of the 4 traditional daily services performed at a Zen temple. I don't know if everybody knows this. We actually do the longer versions of the services as a part of our Sunday program. So some of you are familiar with that version already. But just as a brief digression, and because I think it's helpful to understand, I'd like to give a little explanation of the 4 parts of the service that we did tonight and that we do on Thursday nights. And this is from what you could consider the relative perspective rather than the absolute perspective. So it's a bit descriptive. So to begin, following a formal entry by the officiant, similar to the one that I just did. We, as a body, complete 3 vows and then chant either the Heart Sutra or the Makahanya, like we did tonight, the Makahanya Haramita Shingyo. And this is followed by a dedication of merit. And we first dedicate the merit of our chanting to Shakyamuni Buddha, our original teacher, recognizing that Buddha nature is inherent in all things, including ourselves. Now, second, we express gratitude to our Zen lineage and our Zen ancestors. Without their mind-to-mind transmission of the way, we would not be able to walk this path of practice together. Third, the third part of the service is dedicated to our extended sangha, including our family and teachers, but especially to those who have come before us and have passed on. And then fourth, we end with a wish for healing and support for those who are ill or suffering or in distress. And then at the end of the service, we complete 3 more vows, and there's a formal exit for the officio. Now, in all this, we follow particular forms. And because of this, there's a correct way to perform service, which many of us still struggle with after many years because there's a lot. And when the service is complete, we transition to our 2 periods of zazen, like we did tonight, with a period of kinhin or walking meditation in between. And there are forms for that too, a particular way to do pretty much everything. Now, for some people, the liturgy and all these forms are perceived maybe as a formality that can be off-putting or just maybe a little bit weird. Some feel maybe that it's too stiff or it's, a little too controlling, or some people feel that Zen, I've been told some people feel that Zen is maybe somehow militaristic because we're all required to sit up straight and do things in unison. But whatever it is, but for some people, it brings up resistance and negative associations. But what actually is the purpose of all these forms? Liturgy, the service, all the bowing, all of it. Well, generally speaking, forms offer us a way to come together as a group to enact and embody our practice and our understanding of the Dharma, to express it with our bodies and not just hold it in our minds. It's easy to get the impression that practice is mainly meditation and that this is something that we do with our minds. It's Zazen and Zen practice in general. It's something we do with our whole being and not just when we're sitting. So in a very practical sense, the forms are also there to promote mindfulness, to reduce the noise and distraction of the environment, and to promote a sense of unity and community, which I think it does quite well. So these practical benefits are sometimes described as creating a container. Some of you may have heard this phrase before. A container for practicing together. So if you ever participated in a week-long Zen retreat, a sesshin, where everyone has settled in to the you can practice being created, and it supports and carries you along all through the week. And often, despite your expectations at the beginning of the week, when you get to the end, you might wish that you could keep practicing in that way, because it's quite a wonderful and sometimes unexpected experience, especially if you've never encountered it before. Now, all the forms that we observe are a vital aspect of Zen practice. When we practice together, we should wholeheartedly embody the forms, both for our own sake, but also for the sake of others, as an act of service to others. Together, we can create the container of practice. When we chant together, we just chant wholeheartedly. When we bow, we just bow together with our whole being. That's all. At the same time, while the forms are a very important aspect of practice, and I encourage all of you to redouble your commitment to practicing the forms as minutely as you can. It can be easy for us to mistake the motions that we go through with our body as the time when we are doing our practice. So I want to say something about that. So when we have our Zen clothes on, and when we chant and bow and sit together in our Zen meditation posture, we are certainly, most certainly doing our practice. But no matter how genuinely we practice here at Crow Zen, if when we go home, we put away our practice until next Thursday, that would be a missed opportunity. Sometimes when folks have been away for a while and haven't been able to come on Thursday nights, I hear them say, I haven't been able to practice very much lately. So when we say this, we're identifying our practice with the things that look like Zen practice from the outside, the forms, just chanting and bowing and sitting in meditation. We're also identifying with the places where the forms happen, such as here at Crow Zen or Sunday, White Heron. Now, of course, this is not a new problem, not a new issue that we face. In fact, about 800 years ago in his essay, Fukan Zazengi, Universal Recommendation for Zazen, Dōgen warns against thinking that the Dharma or real Zen practice is someplace other than where we already are. He says, why leave behind the seat in your own home to wander in vain through the dusty realms of other lands? If you make one misstep, you stumble past what is directly in front of you. The way is originally perfect and all-pervading. It is never apart from this very place. What is the use of traveling around to find it? Dōgen is pointing to our inclination to think real Zen practice or true practice is somewhere else. Well, strictly speaking, he's saying it isn't necessary to make the difficult trek to China like he did in his day in order to find the true Dharma. But his message is pretty much the same for us today. The way is never apart from this very place. So we can think it's in the forms that we practice with, especially bowing, sitting silently, or the places we gather as a sangha, or where others practice, especially places where it seems like real practice takes place. Maybe it's in Japan, maybe it's in Tibet or India, definitely some other place that's hard to get to. Or we could think that it's in particular words, maybe a talk or writing from a famous teacher, or a book or a sutra, maybe words that have been studied and quoted for hundreds or even thousands of years. So in the koan that I introduced earlier, lecturer Liang had his own idea about the Dharma and true Zen practice. So this case, called Mazu's Heart Sutra, is named after Master Mazu, so I should say something briefly about him, since he is at least one of the two stars in this show. Master Mazu, called Baso in Japanese, in 8th century China, and was the Dharma grandson, Master Weinin, the sixth patriarch. So one day, just to recap a bit, he was talking to one of his students, a guy named Liang, and Liang was a famous lecturer on the Dharma. And so Mazu asked him, what sutra do you teach? And Liang answers, the Heart Sutra. Mazu says, how do you teach it? Liang says, with the mind. How else would you teach it? But Liang doesn't realize that his teacher is testing him. Mazu says, well, the mind is like an actor. The will is like a supporting actor. The objects of the six senses are all like their company. How can they teach the sutra? So Mazu compares all of these things we commonly think of as I or me to actors that are just playing a part that was written for them. And by implication, he's asking Liang, who's actually the author of the play? Where does it come from? If it's not these three, then who is teaching the sutra? And Liang doesn't understand, but he seems to have some idea what the answer is that he ought to give. So he asks his teacher, if the mind can't teach it, can emptiness teach it? Maybe he doesn't just know what the answer probably is. Maybe he's also a bit unsure what that answer means. Mazu simply says, yes, emptiness can teach it. So the case says, Liang then flipped his sleeves and walked away, suggesting that he thought he had actually won the encounter. But then, as he's leaving, Mazu calls out to him, hey, lecturer. Liang turns his head and Mazu says, from birth till death, it's just like this. And in the naturalness and simplicity of that interaction, Liang's academic knowledge and intellectualizing dropped. And he experienced this timeless, unpindownable moment, seeing it directly just as it is. And then the koan goes on to say that he disappeared forever, which if you have that insight, I don't think you're required to disappear forever. And I would miss you, any one of you, who disappeared, but that's totally up to you. So as the capping verse says on this koan, going to where life itself springs forth, the body of suchness is revealed. Going to where life itself springs forth, the body of suchness is revealed. Well, in this story, lecturer Liang mistook his ideas about the Dharma for the genuine article. So he missed the ever-present truth right in front of his nose. That is, until his teacher abruptly pointed this out. Hey, from birth till death, just like this. Mazu's direct pointer should be a pointer for us all. What do we think practice is? Where do we think it is? We can look a lot of different places for the Dharma, for the true way of practice. The true practice is always right where you are in this moment. It's never apart from where you are. How do we practice like this? How do we practice with this? One way is simply to be curious about your experience. We can investigate what it's like to be this person who sees through these eyes, hears through these ears. We inhabit this marvelous mental and emotional sense apparatus, the human body. And because of this, whether we see it or not, our practice is always and already continuous from end to end, without any breaks or interruptions, whether we're aware of it or not. As Roshi down in Yokoji once witnessing something, whether we're aware of it or not. So we should raise the intention continuously to engage with our life directly in every moment. Engaging doesn't mean things will always be serene or blissful. Our life is our life. What it is at any moment may be far from serene or blissful, but it is what is actually here. I'd like to end with a quote from Geoffrey Shugen Arnold, Roshi, who is the current abbot at Zen Mountain Monastery. And I actually rewrote the end of my talk to fit this in, as I discovered it just the other day. Shugen Roshi says, in the end, the purpose of all the koans and all the sutras and all the sitting that we do is simply to meet the reality that is always here, always present. Meeting this moment free and unhindered, we find joy at the heart of aliveness. thank you for your attention. So now, at this time, what little we have left, I welcome your questions and comments, and I hope we can have a discussion with whatever's coming up for you in response to this talk. Thank you. Start. Who heard the frog this evening? For some reason, I took it as encouragement from my talk. Maybe you had your hand up?
Yeah. The idea of like going elsewhere for your practice reminds me a lot of just, I feel like that's a very common thing broader, like in our culture, like this idea of always chasing something that is not here and pushing that goal farther and farther, or like feeling the need to travel somewhere to get this like idea of like what practices or whatever else people are looking for. And I appreciate the challenge to find it here, because it is here, and yet that's a reminder I will always welcome and need many times. And so I don't know, your talk feels very relevant, and makes me think of just the other day I like had an argument with a loved one, and then right after was like, huh, what would have been different if I had viewed this as my practice. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your talk, Kanjō. Similar to what Megan mentioned is that part you read from I think the Fukan Zazengi, where Dogen's talking about you don't need to go anywhere, and it's right here, but he went somewhere. And then you began your talk talking about how we diligently practice these forms over and over. And I saw kind of a parallel in there, in that you don't have to go anywhere. But in a way, I needed to go somewhere. I needed to be diligently seeking and practicing before I could get back to the point where, as Megan alluded to, practice is always here, but it escapes my notice per se. I wonder if you could maybe talk a little bit about that, just in your experience, and how if or if not, that was your experience and your practice.
You're talking about that dichotomy of needing to go somewhere or do something rather than where you are and what you're already doing.
Yeah, and in particular, when you began, at the start.
Yeah. Well, like most people, I definitely started thinking I needed to go somewhere else. And I used 2 quotes tonight from Zen Mountain Monastery. And when I started many years ago reading books about Buddhism and Zen, I was on the East Coast. And so I always thought, someday I'm going to go up there to Mount Trimper, and I'm gonna go experience the real deal. And still never been there. I did get to FaceTime with Corey when he was there, so I got a virtual tour by somebody who was there. But I think that there is something to aspiration that gets you where you need to go, gets you oriented in the right direction. And that was true for me. One of the things that happened for me was because this book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was always on my bedside table. My wife decided to surreptitiously sign me up to go to Tassajara without telling me for my birthday. And that was great because I had a sort of fanboy moment when I actually set my butt down in the Zendo at Tassajara, and I'm at the real place doing the real thing. And that gave me some encouragement. It did. But luckily I didn't need to go to China or Tibet or India, which is a lot further. I just had to drive up the coast a little ways. But yeah, I think aspiration, and then helps you build your intention.
Mm.
But if it weren't for that push, I don't know that if I would have taken the next steps and been encouraged in the way that I was, that landed me here now in front of all of you. So yeah, there's a bit of a dichotomy there. But then we're all Zen students, we're comfortable with that, right? You know, what was it? Suzuki Roshi said, "You're perfect exactly the way you are, and you use a lot of improvement." I don't know if I got that right, but it's misquoted mostly by me. Is that close?
Very close.
Okay. But I take that as a kind of encouragement. It's nice to know that I'm basically perfect already, exactly as I am, and this feeling that I have a lot of improving to do is also true. It's a good reminder that we're almost at the end, and maybe have time for one more quick one.
Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I think Zen does this to us all the time. The both are true and they're both mutually exclusive, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like, because there's lots of stories about people going to this teacher and that teacher and practicing for 20 years with somebody and nothing happens, and then they go to another teacher and all of a sudden it was the right teacher, right?
Yeah.
But there's lots of talk about it's right here, it's the life you have, it's the teacher you have, it's the, that you don't need that. And I think for me in my own life, both are true. Sometimes I'm really striving. I've got, I'm gonna figure this out. I'm
Yeah.
gonna really practice now. I'm gonna really work at this. And other times it's like, this life just as it is just enough, and both are true. And I don't know how to, I don't know that we need to reconcile them, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Well, some of us were talking the other night about the idea of a paradox. And I was offering the view that paradox is something that exists in our mind but never is encountered in reality. Reality is just the way that it is.
Yeah.
And a paradox only exists when you think something doesn't fit with something else, or you think it's wrong, or you think it's contradictory. But the key word there is think.
Yeah. And I know for myself, that I've said this before, though, that I've learned had as much insight, as much understanding come when I thought I wasn't practicing. When I was just doing my life.
Yeah.
As I've ever gotten from when I think, okay, I'm really practicing now.
Yeah.
It's like the idea is almost a problem.
Get your own way.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate
Great
you.
talk.
No. All right, go ahead.
Numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it. Numberless beings, I